Greetings, Tezos Nation. Welcome to another edition of TezTalks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons. Joining me today is Simon Jones, Chief Commercial Officer at Baanx. Baanx, for those who might not know, is a next-generation service provider for digital asset-friendly financial services that's currently in the process of co-launching its first Etherlink offering right here in the Tezos ecosystem. On today's stream, we'll be giving away 10, yes, that's 10 Nano Ledgers to 10 of our lucky viewers. If you'd like one of those lucky viewers to be you, keep an ear out for a keyword later on during the stream. Then comment with the keyword below this video where it's posted by the @TezosCommons account on X. Hi, Simon. Where are you right now, and how's the weather?
I'm in London, and the weather is shit, as always.
Fair enough. To get the ball rolling, can you tell us a little bit about your background and your personal journey into the exciting world of blockchain technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent pretty much most of my career in one way, shape, or form at the kind of intersection between consumer, data, and transaction. So originally I started off in finance, and then realized that that was pretty lame. Beyond the fact you got paid, it wasn't much fun. And then basically went over more into the tech world in terms of building stuff. So I've worked in social media, I've worked in payments, I've worked in different sectors. I've been involved in starting a few different companies. And then kind of prior to joining Baanx, I actually was a VC fund manager. So I looked after the kind of early stage European portfolio for a US endowment, mainly investing into kind of fintech associated peripherals. And I suppose the thing that really kind of grabbed me in the journey, I mean, I wasn't particularly old when the credit crisis happened, right? I was 3 years out of college, as you guys would say. So I think that was kind of when I first started looking at alternative systems and ideas and monetary value and all these other things. And probably going from there, I think that what became fairly obvious to me was there was this kind of traditional world of products that basically didn't work, but you had to use them because I want to send you money. How do I do it, right? And they were slow and inefficient. And then you had this kind of emergent sector of fintech, right, which was obviously a bit more liberal, a bit more straightforward, more kind of consumer focused, more product focused, which I wouldn't say all the banks are. And then, what I saw probably 3 or 4 years ago was this idea of, hang on, if you've got fintech over here where you've got the ability for consumer to choose the product they want, the obvious thing to do is for kind of Web3 and fintech to merge together, and for non-custodial options to be this thing where you can build, kind of containerized applications where you, the user, can configure your own platform in the way that you want it to work through a series of dApps or snaps or whatever you want to call them. And that was really it. It was one of those things where it's like, ideologically, why do we need custody, right? If you look back, custody started because it was the safest place to keep your money was in a bank because it was secure, more secure than your house, right? But nowadays, the world is digital. So why is the custody world not digital? Why is it not self-custodial? And that was really, I suppose, the long way of answering a very simple question.
Makes sense to me. That journey, of course, has led you to becoming Chief Commercial Officer of Baanx, which is, of course, the reason you're here today. I already introed Baanx on a very basic level off the top there, but for those who might not be overly familiar just yet, what exactly is Baanx and what is its mandate?
Absolutely. So that, I mean, the core purpose really, going back to what I said, is to try and replace the banking layer with technology. So what does that mean? Well, it basically means that you create self-custody without compromise, because I think one of the traditional issues that we have, certainly in the crypto world and Web3, is that this whole kind of range of capability, but you wouldn't want to kind of explain to someone else how to do it, right? So how do you take it down to the kind of consumer level? So we started off back in 2018. We were originally a kind of custodial platform, started off the back of really the kind of ICO, IDO boom, where lots of people made lots of money, but couldn't do much with it. So the kind of initial purpose was, hey, how do we make this accessible? Then, as the models kind of evolved and we partnered with different people like Ledger, 1inch, etc., to bring products to the market, we decided, look, hang on, we need to find a way to make self-custody frictionless. And what I mean by that is, how do you make those assets available in the real world? Because in our mind, if there's enough liquidity and you can price something, why can't you spend it, right? Doesn't matter whether it's crypto, whether it's an air mile, whatever it might be. Ultimately, if you can price something, you should be able to exchange it, and you should be able to pay for it. So we started off kind of, really, I suppose, almost 2 years ago now with a blank sheet of paper. But the whole idea was, kind of looking at some products in the market that say they're self-custodial, but then you have to delegate funds to a smart contract, or you have to do something like that. And you said, well, look, in reality, how is that different to sending my money to Coinbase, right? Yeah, I've got to lock it up. I've got to send it somewhere. Why not send it to the easiest place, which probably is somewhere like that, as opposed to loading a smart contract? So let's create a world in which your funds can sit with you until the point that you have chosen to spend them. So equivalent of like, virtualizing your physical wallet, where once upon a time you used to go into the store, you had $50 in your wallet, you hand the $50 over, they give you a change, right? But that $50 was yours until you gave it to someone. We're really kind of working on the same principle with crypto, that you can connect that to a card, and then you just authorize the ability to delegate. So the easiest way to think about it is like open banking for crypto, right? So we've all used something like Plaid, where you can connect multiple funding sources, where you can do these different things. Think about it like that, but in a digital world, a tokenized world. And that really is kind of the mission for us, is to drive that next generation of content creation, product creators, product builders towards a much more accessible world, and hopefully one where we don't need Apple and Google to control app stores. Okay.
And to that end of accomplishing that mission that you just sort of laid out, what does a chief commercial officer at Baanx do exactly? Can you like walk us through a workday in the life of Simon Jones?
Oh God, do you want the truth?
Yes.
Okay. Normally I wake up sometimes hungover, because obviously being chief commercial officer is quite a sociable role. You have to be out there meeting people. I tend to kind of start work in the morning at home. If I'm here, I travel a lot. I probably spend 3 or 4 months a year on the road, kind of meeting people. And then, if I look at my average work day, I think, I spend a lot of time talking to partners and customers. So, we have weekly calls, recurring calls, standing calls, where I'm, chatting about stuff, trying to work on things with them, trying to come up with ideas. Product, obviously, falls into that, because as chief commercial officer, you have to be the voice of the customer in those conversations. Spend a fair amount of time, working across tech team. I generally try to avoid turning up to management meetings if I can get away with it. It's the one great thing about being a chief commercial officer. If anybody else is out there thinking, you can always put an important client meeting in your diary. And obviously a huge chunk of it is pitching. It's showing demos, it's talking to people, it's trying to understand. And then really, I suppose, that's one part of my job. And then the second part of my job is around the kind of commercial strategy, the go-to-market, how can I make things better. And I guess the third part really is doing stuff like this, where actually, it's communicating, right? Because we're in the ideas business, right? And it's not just me having an idea, it's other people following that idea, but it's also talking to creators and saying, hey, guys, there's ways that you can do these things that don't have to be constrained by those traditional structures of the internet, right? And trying to encourage people really, to build. So that's probably a fairly good summary. Beyond that, I think probably everything else I could say would get me in trouble with compliance. So I better.
That's fair.
Stop.
That's fair. So a moment ago, you mentioned that you did have some experience in finance, and it didn't really take, and then that sort of led you down this path. So what made financial technology and this sort of leg of the larger financial services sector an appealing destination for you?
Because the products suck, right? If you like, depending on what your view is, right? But, we all have our own views, right? If I said to you, hey, choose a messaging app, right? You might say, I use Signal, I use Telegram, I use WhatsApp, right? That's fine. Like, it's personal preference. If you said to me, a social media platform, right? You've got a TikTok, you've got a Snapchat, you've got Instagram, you've got all these other platforms, right? Again, it's personal preference. And people will have, generally platforms they really like. Reverse that question and say, show me a product like a bank that you really like. Show me a financial experience that you really like, right? And you can do a full 360 on that. It's not just from the consumer perspective. If you look at, for example, merchant, right? When you go and tap a card to pay, the average merchant pays 5% just to be paid. And when you extrapolate that towards, small businesses and people like that, they're actually the ones paying it, right? Bigger stores don't pay it. They will negotiate it down to virtually nothing because people want their business. But when you kind of really start to extrapolate that across, you say, well, look, the product sucks, the system sucks, but ultimately you're forcing people to sit inside a series of structures that have been defined by somebody else somewhere for their benefit, right?
Mm.
So why wouldn't you want to reverse that model and say, how can I make this work for me? And to me, the whole idea of digital money, the smart evolution of money, is a really interesting concept, because I think people forget, payments, for example, as a sector, it's a $2 trillion sector, right? And then you look at banking, it's roughly $6 trillion. But then you've also got to overlay that with, who is that serving? Who are the beneficiaries of that system, right? And my view is that you're always going to need a system because you always need to pay people, but you can build a better one. The other thing I think also to look at when you're thinking about this kind of space, non-custodial neobanking, which is one of my favorite phrases at the moment, there are 1.2 billion people in the world who either don't have a bank account or do not have access to a suitable form of financial services product. So part of our kind of core mission is to say, look, anybody who has a mobile phone should be able to access a basic range of financial services. And to me, that's really interesting, because most other things have kind of been done. This is a space where I think it's just beginning. And I think that there'll be this kind of huge cascade, huge ripple effect as we move towards the digital economy that actually, I just find it interesting. I guess I'm a geek, right? I sit at home and I think about how you can improve settlement flows between, Canada and the UK so that your paycheck doesn't go missing for 6 weeks at a time.
Along the lines of you saying that we're sort of just at the beginning of this, on the About Us page of the Baanx website, when I glanced at it, it says that Baanx believes the digital asset-based financial services are just 5% of their true market potential.
Mm-hmm.
Why does your team see such massive room for growth in this particular arena?
Because ultimately, I think, you have to look at evolution of anything, right? So if you think about the internet, right? And I'm old enough to remember when, the only thing people used the internet for was to watch pornography, and it made strange sounds on the phone line, right? And if your mum heard them, you'd get told off, right? But you think about that journey, which is 20 odd years ago. And this is kind of complete abstract technology. You could kind of access the sum total of everything. The capability was there. You could chat to your friend who lived in California, or you could try and, if you were me growing up in the countryside, try and chat to a girl somewhere you never meet. Or someone who said they were a girl anyway. But it was brilliant, but it was abstract. And I think Web3, I see you look at that evolution of the internet to the point where it started off as this weird thing that you plugged into the back of your telephone box, and very few people used it. To the point where now, actually, of all the things I probably couldn't live without, internet and data is probably the biggest thing.
Yeah,
it literally drives everything from the heating in my house to features on my car to how I communicate to even how we're speaking. Right, it's completely embedded, and I think that I see the whole kind of Web3 crypto space really as being at the start of that journey. You're still at the point where you've got the computer, but you have to buy the graphics card, you have to buy the speakers separately, then you have to buy a modem, and then you have to plug it in, and then it won't work sometimes when it rains, right? But then you evolve and you say, well, the product will be polished, because ultimately, if you look through the benefit statement, why wouldn't you want to digitalize it, right? Why couldn't we be in a world? So, good example. If I try and send you money now, and you're in Canada, right?
I am.
I'm in London. It would go through roughly 9 separate processes. And unless I was prepared to pay a lot of money, it'd probably take 3 or 4 days, and it still cost me money. And that process route is really just to work out that it is you that I'm paying, right? It's something that, was designed in the days of the stagecoach, when people physically used to move things. They just digitalize now and they'll process. Our view is to say, well, look, why can't you just have a world in which I can hit an API, I can send you money straight away, and it's in your account, you can use it, and it's virtually free. It's global, it's instant, right? But then you start to look at, the Apple question, where they take 30% of everything from the App Store, and you start to look at the banking fees. You start to say, hang on, if you can find a way through this stuff, you can cut through it. There's a huge amount of value that you can transfer back to the consumer. So why wouldn't the consumer want that, right? You just have to get to that point where we have reliable enough chains, fast enough chains, and also that kind of level of UI and UX built around those chains, which is one of the reasons we really like Etherlink, by the way, which we'll talk about in a minute. If you can work your way through that, then you really can start to build product that's exciting, right? Where things can be free, instant, global. You can earn yield or passive income on stable coins, right? Programmable yield, all these different concepts. You think, hang on, if I was to bundle that all together, I literally have the financial services super app. But actually, the reality is the core technology is designed to support it by design. And that's what I think we're just at the beginning, right? We're only just starting to see gas fees come down. We're only starting to see real UI and UX improvements. We're still probably in that migratory phase between some of the legacy platforms that were built in 2018 in the crypto world, but perhaps won't be so popular in 5 years' time because something else will come along. But I suppose the technology, the capability, the benefit, which is the big thing, right? But also the idea that there's so many people who are working really hard in this space. I go to a lot of events, and every year I feel a bit older when I turn up. But every year, you're meeting new people, talking about new things, new concepts, new ideas, new enthusiasm. And you think, well, if you look back at why was the internet built? It was built because of the Googles, because of the Amazons, because of the Facebooks, because of all these different platforms. And you look at the number of people trying to crack this, it's probably bigger than the number of people who are trying to build Amazon when Amazon was being built, right? And that's where I think it's really exciting. I also think there's a huge opportunity to fix the design faults of the original internet. Web 2, it should have private keys, not cookies. So many more benefits that you can bring into that. We should have had the ability to tether money to the internet, but because we didn't have private keys, there was no way of doing it. So you still had to work through traditional financial structures. Mm-hmm. We should have kind of built a world in which there was kind of a form of digital repository like a wallet, for example. But none of that stuff was kind of designed into Web 2 by default. So I think that's where Web 3 becomes really, really interesting. I think when you start to then merge that with some of the trends like AI, where you can drive automation and various other things, you really start to get to a world where you have a system of truth, you have a system of record that's non-fungible, but also you have the ability to build smarter process. And if you put that together, you say, well, look, to me, all of the things that I've just said lead me to the inevitable conclusion that if you're going to go and build a product, a neobank or whatever, this is where you want to be. You don't want to be building around traditional scheme rules. You need the ability to take things apart and put them back together. And that's one of the things that we really have specialized in, that atomization effect of I can take things away, I can take them off scheme, I can do this, I can do that, but I can always put them back in a way that the consumer won't even notice.
Okay. And there's a few different things I'm hoping we could get into today about Baanx and the services it offers. But for starters, can you talk a bit about the ongoing quest to bring crypto payments into the mainstream? What problems in the current global payment system can blockchain help solve? I know you did mention having to go through 9 layers of verification on a way to make payment, the slowness. Are there other benefits to this transition?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads, right? I mean, firstly, if you look back at the original white paper, Satoshi's Bitcoin white paper, right? The last step of kind of actualization as such was always crypto payments, right? So that's always been something that's been kind of a key focus for us to look at. But I mean, where to start, right? I mean, firstly, I gave you an example about what people pay to be paid. Why does that need to exist, right? It doesn't. In a digital world, you should just be able to ping something through an API, and it costs next to nothing. Secondly to that, though, you look at things like cross-border payments, and to me, I want to turn cross-border payments to like a fax, right? Years and years ago, everyone used it. Now you probably still could use it, but no one does. Why? Because it's the worst way to send a document. So why can't I just ping stablecoin around the world globally? Why can't I use smart contracts to handle supply chain payments so that when you have these complicated supply chains, and a good example of that actually is travel, right? Because travel is roughly a $1 trillion sector. And the biggest fundamentals of that, of course, is wherever I go, my money has to follow me. Now, if I book a holiday, let's say through a traditional platform like booking.com or something like that. So I do, a flight, a hotel, a car, everything else, right? Actually, what happens is booking.com take my money, but then they pay that money out over a series of steps. So, the plane gets paid a certain number of days after it's flown. The airport gets paid after, so the hotel gets paid after I've checked out. The hire car gets paid after I've dropped the car back. But all those different things are actually individual process steps. There's no reason why you can't just create a smart contract and move that money through blockchain, right? There's also a huge transparency benefit to this, right? I mean, in theory, fraud should be almost impossible to commit if you can see the wallet and you can see the flows. So if you're a corporate treasury guy trying to look at your own internal workings, the easiest way to do it is just be able to visualize everything in one place at the same time. So those are real life use cases, and they're actually quite meaningful. We're kind of talking about stuff there, which in each instance you're talking billions and billions of dollars a year of kind of value that's been extracted. But I think secondary to that, going back to the point I made earlier about people who are unbanked, right? Those people are completely excluded. But the thing about that is that actually what you see in those environments is those people are maybe financially excluded, but they're finding other systems. So they're still finding a way to pay for their Netflix subscription. But actually what that means is that the poorest people in society are paying the most, right? Which to me, there has to be a level of democracy in blockchain, right? It has to treat me in the same way that it treats, somebody who has no money, right? I'm not saying I have a lot of money, but just, relatively speaking, right? You have to, and that's what I love about blockchain. The idea that, someone moved, was it $100 million worth of Bitcoin the other day and paid $153 in fees. Try moving $100 million in a bank account, right? Equally, why are people paying 30-40% premiums just to pay for Netflix, right? It's mad. And if you create a world in which things are just virtual, digital, it works. You're really, people think that banking and financial services are digital. They're not. They're analog, but they've been digitalized. And what we're saying is you just should digitalize the whole thing, so that it's just ping, 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 done, right? Settlement moves with the flow as opposed to waiting. So example, go back to my example there, if I send you money and the amount of time that takes, why can't I just initiate settlement at the same time as I send the money? Just there.
Switching gears a little bit, I understand there may be some Tezos-powered payment cards currently in the works. What can you tell us about those?
Well, obviously I need to be a little bit careful I get shot by both marketing and compliance. But we're working with Etherlink. We really like the product. And the plan would be that we're going to create a version of on-chain spending where, going back to my point earlier, where funds would sit with the user's wallet till they go and till they want to go and spend it. But we'll be working on a version that you can connect to into the Etherlink world to enable kind of decentralization of payment. And that's a fairly big objective for later this year. So I've been really enjoying working with the team at Etherlink on a number of things, and we'll also be then partnering to try and scale that solution more broadly, to other people, right? So if you're a content creator who's got a wallet and you want some form of infrastructure, why not come and put that on Etherlink and then connect it? Because you can connect it, your users can connect it, you can create this kind of seamless flow where you've got access to both store of value and liquidity, which ultimately is the thing we all want, right?
Can you expand a bit on the partnership between yourselves and Etherlink and how it took shape? Like, what does the relationship between Baanx and Etherlink look like?
Absolutely. So look, the relationship between Baanx and Tezos is actually a pretty long-standing one, right? So I actually think Tezos were one of the first people to invest in Baanx back in 2020. So we've always had kind of a shared kind of loyalty to each other, right? We've kind of been on the same journey. And the good, the bad, and the ugly we've all been through over the years, right? And then basically, long story short, kind of last year, reconnected with the Tezos team around the plans for Etherlink. And we looked at kind of the details of what they were building and went, hang on, this is great. It's firstly, and this is the thing actually, probably quite boring, but The bit that a lot of people miss is that obviously Etherlink is hard coded into layer one. So what that means is that it will still work even if there's no for-profit supporting it. So let's say we fast forward 10 years and for whatever reason the world has changed, the technology will still work. And I think a lot of people forget that when they're looking at kind of chain selection. There are a lot of these L2s, especially Ethereum L2s, where they're only as strong as the support network that they're going to have around the for-profit development side of the chain. So that was a big thing for us. But then secondly, high frequency, low latency, low gas fee, EVM compatible, great MEV stats. This is basically the chain that we wanted. So what we do when we test chains is we basically do a thing called load testing, right? It's really, really simple. We just fire traffic across it and see how it performs. Because ultimately, I have to look at this stuff in the same way I look at payments infrastructure. And the one thing that we know about things like Visa and MasterCard systems is generally they work, right? It's very rare for them to go down. So I can't kind of create an environment where, hey, I'll put everything on chain, but hey, it works every Tuesday for 3 hours and then it goes offline. That's not going to work, right? Yeah. So when we tested Etherlink, what we found was actually in load testing, it held up really, really well. And obviously the way the gas fee structure is designed is totally compatible with the idea that you just have a straight flow. So we were like, yeah, this is great. So then we spent, the last, year really kind of working through the various different levels of the integration, the smart contract writing, the delegation, the abstraction. Obviously, it's great that it supports ERC 4337 as a standard, which is account abstraction. For anyone who's a geek like me, basically means that you can connect things to stuff. It wasn't necessarily designed to be there in the first instance. And we just like, well, why wouldn't we build on this chain, right? It's fast, it's cheap, it does everything we want it to do. And also, we have a lot of kind of confidence in the team at Tezos. We spend a lot of time with them, we work with them, they're good people, they know what they're doing. There's this kind of sense of purpose and sense of mission. And I think, sometimes with decentralization, people forget that part of it and how important that can be, because in any environment, you need to trust people to build things in the right way and keep supporting them. I think, just overall, the value prop we thought was excellent. We liked it equally when we've kind of gone out to people and said, hey, what do you think about this? Do you like this? The general view is great. So now, we're in the early stages. We've obviously got to boost liquidity on Etherlink and do various other things, but we're really confident that, in the next few years, we'll be able to deliver products both to the existing crypto audience, but also to a wider, consumer audience built on Etherlink.
Very exciting. All great stuff so far. I'm excited to learn more, but before we dive into the nitty gritty, are you ready for the world famous TezTalks lightning round?
Okay, let's go for it. I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Great. Just before we do that, I'd like to announce today's keyword for the 10 Ledger Nanos we're giving away today. Today's keyword is !Baanx. That is BAANX. Enter the keyword !Baanx below this video on X, and Nightbot will randomly select today's winner, who will announce in the comments below this video on X as well. Okay, now Simon, it's lightning round time. Remember, there are no wrong answers. This is just for fun, so our viewers can get to know you a little bit better. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Pizza or sushi?
I ate too much pizza and I have to switch to sushi.
Fair. Movies or video games?
Movies.
Is this real life or are we in a simulation?
Definitely a simulation.
True or false? Money buys happiness.
Only in a nightclub.
Good answer. Name one thing you absolutely want to do before you die.
I'm not sure I can say it for legal reasons. One thing I absolutely would do before I die, I want to go scuba diving in Fiji, which I'm due to do in August.
Awesome.
Yep.
The last place you traveled was?
Zurich.
Very nice. In 5 words or less, how would your best friend describe you?
I'm not sure I can say it on a family show. I think he would say I am crazy, alternative, and generally nice. Okay. More than 5 words, but hey.
Close enough.
You said no rules rule. Yeah.
Finally, what's your favorite thing to do on a rainy day?
Drink.
Excellent answers. This concludes the TezTalks lightning round. Let's get back into it. When we talk about changing the way these parts of the financial system operate, we're talking about the potential for pretty significant changes for a whole lot of people in our world.
Yeah.
Can you touch on your personal view on why the ways we make payments, the ways we bank, and the ways we manage our assets needs to change?
Sure. I mean, let's take it from a very simple ideological point, and then we'll go down to a bit more detail, right? But I mean, technology is global, right? It is. It works anywhere. You can plug into the internet. But payments aren't, and financial services aren't, right? So we live in this world where, the world is very big, but it's increasingly getting smaller. And, one of the last kind of vestiges of non-reformed sector is financial services, right? So that is just an ideological point. And I think if you look at that, especially if you look at it from like a platform perspective, and you look at anybody out there who's trying to build something, trying to create a business, trying to do all these different things, they have this kind of huge amount of friction. And I think the fact that you look at the companies that kind of conquered the world, the Googles, the Apples, etc., Meta, right? None of those guys have ever even tried to come into this arena. And that's because obviously the way in which this arena is designed is unduly complicated. That's the first point. I think the second point, though, is this whole idea of like, hey, I give my money to someone because I have to put it somewhere, basically. But then I have to pay them to get it back. I have to pay them when I want to go and pay. Or, hey, someone else has to pay to receive my money, right? That doesn't make any sense to me, right? Like, it's just illogical. Like, you've always got to have some level of fee because at the end of the day, it's a business, right? But why should it be the case that, somebody else gets to dictate what exchange rate I get or what interest rate I get or what it costs me to make a payment? That doesn't make any sense, right? That should be my decision. If I want to pay in a certain way, I should be able to press that button. If I receive money a certain way, I should be able to press that button. If I want to put my savings somewhere and earn a certain yield on it, I should be able to pick 5 providers, not one. So that kind of closed architecture of the system is really a huge drag, right? And I've used a lot of numbers on this podcast, but $8 trillion combined, banking and payments. And to me, that's just abstracting value from the economy. It's taking money from a consumer and it's redistributing it into the world of the corporate, right? Now, the problem is you can't avoid that. You can't live your life, unfortunately, without it in most parts of the world. And I think when you take that forward, you say, well, hang on, why can't you create a series of products that enable me to take my own decision to be my own bank? And that's really, I don't see what the reason is, right? I mean, the security layer of your Web3 wallet is probably higher than the security layer on your banking app on your phone. And everyone does everything off their phones nowadays. So why can't you have that evolution where you say, actually, you know what, I'm gonna pull this together and I'm gonna basically enable the consumer to make that choice. But also what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually disaggregate. So if you think about it this, every time you go on Google and you search for something as an advert, someone is paying for your eyeballs to look at that. And you're not getting the money. In an environment where you're using a blockchain wallet, for example, you can solve the biggest issue in retail, which is that if I go to a store every day and I buy stuff, but I don't give them my details, I don't know who I am. So why can't you just create an environment which you can say, hey, you know what? I like shopping at Nike. I'm going to switch this thing so Nike can communicate with my wallet and send me offers, right? Or I'm going to do this in a way that, the affiliate income that you get for clicking on that link actually goes back to the consumer as a cashback reward or something, as opposed to it going to, some anonymous corporate somewhere. And that's the bit that I really think is quite exciting. I mean, look, Apple, Google, 30% of everything you spend in the App Store, they take only for the access. And I keep going back to that example because I find it quite egregious. But imagine a world in which you say, hang on, you know what? you have some cash back on your purchases, or your purchase is cheaper. And actually, yeah, the consumer's better off, the creator's better off, all because you just missed a step in the process.
Yeah.
That's what I like.
Okay. And what we're really talking about here is a financial world where, as I've heard it put before, the phone in anyone's pocket can effectively operate as their bank and meet the majority of their financial services needs.
Yeah.
And I know you touched on this a bit earlier, but I'd like to hear you expand on it. What would a shift like that represent for people from parts of the world or from backgrounds where banking access might be limited?
It's massive, right? Because it's almost impossible if you want to live in the Western world, you want access to, opportunity wherever you are, right? You want access to, a quality of opportunity as well. So, let's say, for example, I live in a country where, I don't have a bank account or I can't access a bank account. I'm living in a hyperinflationary economy, for example, like Argentina, where you need fairly high deposit balances to get into US dollar bank accounts, typically $10,000. The average Argentinian person doesn't have $10,000, so therefore they're subjected to hyperinflation. So just that ability to say, hey, you can switch that into a non-custodial environment, you could peg to the dollar. I mean, that's huge in any hyperinflationary economy. But if you're going back to, let's say, let's pick a user persona, right? Let's make one up on the spot. So someone who wants to get into a high-paid career, like becoming, a dev, right, in the blockchain world or whatever, and they're really smart and they're bright, and they're sat in a country where you have a very high rate of unbanking. Let's pick India, for example, right? And that person wants to start working for a company in America. The one issue they have is how they get paid, right? Because if they haven't got a bank account, their only option is going to be paid by some kind of money service, which is obviously going to be really expensive, really slow, and unfair. So why not have an environment where you can spin up a containerized account, tokenized bank account, just because you have a phone? And then, hey, lo and behold, our friend who's worked really hard, who's sat in India, can start trading all over the world because he has access to the global economy.
Yeah.
And that to me, it's just a remarkably compelling use case.
Definitely.
To say where technology really comes to social good. And one of the things that a lot of people talk to me about, because obviously crypto, as we all know, has slightly mixed reputation, right, with different people, right? You have people like me and you think it's great. You also get that person where you're debating whether you tell them at a dinner party what you work in, right?
Yeah.
normally, you sometimes play it safe and say I work in finance. But if you think about the social benefit of that, right, there isn't a single bank in the world that could achieve that.
Yeah.
But there is technology that could achieve that. And I think, that whole kind of crypto for good, social benefit, democratization, fairness, replatforming of the world, that's the exciting bit to me. And I think that's where you start to look at the example you just gave and you say, actually, that transforms someone's life. And maybe not just their life, the lives of the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that by writing some code.
Yeah. And some of that did get lost in the early hype cycle and the number go up stuff, but that was the true promise of this technology, right? Was to be able to democratize that stuff and decentralize it and make it more accessible for more people and remove the gatekeepers, right? So being at this point now where we 100% agree on that and agree that that's important and agree that that matters, how do we make these types of products more accessible for those people?
That's the existential question, right? And if I knew the answer, I'd probably be sat on a yacht rather than a rainy London, right? I think what you have to look at is the connectivity piece. So to me, the route has to be mobile, because more people have mobile phone than they have any other device.
Yeah.
And I think that then you have to go and you have to build partnerships with people in that environment. And you have, for example, telcos, carriers, the virtual networking solutions. And you say to these guys, look, we can partner with you to put these products in the hands of your consumer. And hey, you can actually get some revenue, right? Because the strange thing about some of those utilities is they touch a lot of consumers, but they don't actually make a lot of money out of the individual consumer. As someone told me the other day, if you think about utility, the person who made your bathroom makes more money than the person who supplies the water, right? Which I quite like that analogy. So I think, it's things like that. I think it's partnership. I think it's also watching some of the platforms. Like I think things like X actually really will be quite interesting, depending on whether they actually really finally reveal what they want to do. But putting wallets in, I think things like Telegram as a messaging app as well, where you can start to embed wallets. All these different kind of points. And I think, this will be one of those kind of drip, 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 drip revolution kind of moments where kind of, there'll be a third of the world that makes it happen, a third of the world that watched it happen, and a third of the world that wonders what happened. But I think, the key to this always is to build collaboratively, to build expansively, and to build in a world where you can always pull things apart and put them back together. The atomization is what I always like to say, although I get told off by marketing for saying that because probably no one knows what it means. Yeah.
And go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, so it's really about how you partner with existing companies, communities, projects that have a user base, and how you show those users the benefit. That's always the goal, right? You're never going to outspend these guys on user acquisition or marketing or any of that stuff. You just have to build better products and push them harder.
And if it works better, then theoretically, people will gravitate to it naturally, right?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, if you look at a great product, I think, in the fintech world is Revolut, right? I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's massive in Europe. Pretty, I think they're in the US now. But one of the reasons why people like me started using Revolut was because they overnight said, hey, we're not going to charge any FX fees. So when I went traveling or went on holiday or whatever, I could literally see the difference in what I spent because I wasn't being charged 10% extra every payment.
Yeah.
So of course I started using Revolut. And that's the angle that we have here with all the different hooks we can pull in to say, well, why wouldn't you use that, right?
Yeah. And as you pull in those hooks, as you put it, and as you make these things more accessible and build out that infrastructure, you can also theoretically be able to put Web3 blockchain tech and crypto into the hands of billions of people across the globe. On the other end of it, what would that mean for the larger blockchain and crypto landscape?
So it's interesting, right? So I think you're going to see an evolution, right? And obviously, naturally, you're always going to see an evolution in any sector, right? But I think you're going to see, in my mind, you're going to see kind of three distinct splits, right? So if we look at kind of crypto today, you really have what is effectively a store of value, right? And it's L1s, tokens, L2 tokens, meme coins, Doge coins, whatever, right? It's digital assets. So let's say digital assets is a store of value here, right? Then you're going to have a second vertical, which is effectively the infrastructure vertical, right? So how do I decentralize the stock market? So if I want to buy it, how do I decentralize payments so that I can make them flow? How do I do this? How do I do that, right? And that will be, to some extent, interdependent on the L1, and it will boost the volumes, it'll boost the revenues, it'll boost the fees, it'll boost the liquidity, it'll lead to a huge boom in stable coins and things like that, because suddenly there's this real world asset world moving on chain. And then I think you're going to see a third category, which is product, right? And it will be, interdependent on one another. They will be kind of coterminous. Because in all likelihood, if I'm using the info over here, I'm going to hold something over here, and I might use a product over here, right? But I think you're going to just see this evolution away from just being, what is in a lot of instances a store of value, towards infrastructure and product being alongside that. But then I think if you think about that from a classic, corporate perspective, right? I mean, you have shareholders who are customers who spend money with companies who use their products, right? It's the same virtuous circle, except it's a lot more open, a lot more democratic, and you have a lot more say in what can go on, especially around the L1 world. So to me, it's exciting. It's inclusive. I think that also I love the agility of open source communities, right? I love the idea you can come along and you can throw up a product over the top of something that people have already built, and you can be fast, you can be cheap, you can be cool, but also you can kind of get a product out there very, very quickly and cheaply in some instances, that actually has the ability to scale. And you're doing all of that because you're choosing to build in the blockchain world as opposed to choosing to build, in a traditional Salesforce, Google, Apple, cloud way where everything is basically preordained as to what you can and can't do and what you learn out of it.
Yeah.
And that's really the evolution I see. And so I think, long story short, it's going to be big.
We certainly hope so. and to that end of getting those products out there and building out that infrastructure, what's next for the Baanx team? Do you have any other exciting rollouts or announcements in the works?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Not sure I can give you one today. I think we did give you one with the Tesla, with the Etherlink stuff actually, but yeah. So long story short, I mean, we're working with kind of 6 of the top 10 wallets at the moment. We have a very big wallet planned to go live later in the year. All I will say on that is if you look kind of in the next month or so around ECC, you should see an announcement, which we're really excited about because it's the new product we're shipping, the non-custodial product, or Web3 card as we call it. We've also then signed a whole bunch of partnerships with other people to start promoting these products through their wallets. So I think the next 6 to 12 months are going to be pretty exciting for us. I think the real key for us is to kind of grow the user base to over 1 million users, right? That's the target for the next 12 months, because if we can achieve that with the new product, it means we actually really have a product that people like and they want, and then in theory we can just keep going. Beyond that, we're launching in the US later this year. I'm not going to give a date because every time I do it gets moved, but not by us. But that's big for us because it'll be effectively mean that we're the only people with a product like ours that will be able to operate in the States at the moment. So that's great. Rolling out to further countries in Europe, looking at Latin America, just generally kind of a lot going on, new products, new launches. And we're really trying to focus in on kind of, this year, for example, how we can link the kind of social benefit and the rewards and the products together in a way that reward the user. So we've been kind of thinking about this whole idea of keep it simple. How do I write the press release? What does this do for me, right? Is this the card that lets me, contribute to a validation node on the Tezos blockchain, for example? And that's my reward point. And then I get my validation rewards. I get the card that basically will, in perpetuity, earn me something, right? Those are the kind of things we've been really working on. And then, beyond that, really, I think it's just going to be a year of, get shit done.
It certainly sounds like it. I have about a dozen questions that we were not able to get to because unfortunately we're coming up to the end here, but maybe we can do it again sometime as these things continue to roll out.
Yeah, sure. We can do a quick fire round next time. Just
yes, we could do the whole thing in that format.
To be fair, most of my calls are like that. Like, what do you need me for?
Before we close off, I'd like to remind our viewers that we're giving away 10 Nano Ledgers today. To enter, just type the keyword !Baanx into the comments below this video on X. For those who miss out today, we remind you there are awesome giveaways to be found frequently here on TezTalks Live, so keep tuning in. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our social media contacts can be found at tezoscommons.org/TezTalks, and we'd love to hear from you. Simon, thanks so much for joining us today. It's always awesome to speak to the folks helping change the world of global finance with blockchain technology and make it work better for us all. Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we sign off here?
No, I'd say thank you very much for having me. Obviously, apologies, don't know how to listen to me. And I hope to see you guys again soon.
Awesome. To everyone out there in Tezos land, thanks for joining us on TezTalks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons, and our awesome guest has been Simon Jones, Chief Commercial Officer at Baanx. Now let's go get digital asset friendly.